Happy New Year, friends and associates. This year I've decided to add a YouTube channel. I think I'm going to call it Rick's Rants. I want to be able to talk about topics and things that I'm interested in. Maybe some of my pet peeves, some of my observations, a little bit of maybe some paranormal and things like that, things I've seen or heard about that are interesting topics for further research. Anyway, I hope you're all starting this new year in a good way, and hope you have a great 2023. Today's topic I actually want to talk about is something that's bothered me, or it's been in the back of my mind for several years now. I don't remember or recall the exact year that this occurred. I would say it was about 5 years ago. I'll do a little research and post the exact date as an asterisk in my video here. But anyway, a friend and I were mule deer hunting, a rifle mule deer hunt. It was in later October, and we were hunting in an area near a large drainage that has a stream. You Eastern folks would call it a creek, but to us it's a stream or a small river out here in the West, and it was not too far away from a small rural ranching community. And we were setting up, waiting for mule deer to come out of some agriculture fields a mile or so away to move to their bedding areas, their typical bedding areas. For those of you that don't know much about mule deer that live in agricultural areas, they come down during the evening or early evening and go into these fields, and they typically graze and feed in the agricultural fields during the night, and then they return just before daylight or just at daylight, and if you're positioned in the right spot back in the trees or back on their travel paths, you can either shoot them or harvest them while they're returning to their beds, or see where they bed and then plant a stalk or something on an animal that you identify as a target you're seeking. Anyway, on this particular day, we were sitting there in a likely travel location for the deer. We were, glassing and looking around. It was still too early to see anything with your naked eye. Through a quality pair of binoculars, you could actually make out features and things, up to 50 to 100 feet away. It was a very clear morning. When we got out there, you could actually see quite a few stars in the sky. There was not a moon, and so it was a dark phase of the moon. And you could clearly, when you looked up into the sky, you could clearly see the stars and the ambient light. You could see the sky much better than you could see along the ground, which is typical when you have a lot of stars. Anyway, as I was looking around and you really couldn't see much, and I would look up occasionally and admire the sky, and it just happened at one time that I saw a dark spot that in the sky that hadn't been there before, and I got my binoculars and I looked up into the sky, and much to my amazement, I saw an aircraft that looked like a black jet, a small black jet that was just hovering in one spot, and it was a little bit to the south of us. I don't know what it was doing, but it was totally silent, and the only thing that we could hear where we were at was the creek in the background, and the rustling of the leaves from some of the dead leaves that were falling off from the trees in that drainage. But other than that, it was very quiet. And this aircraft was in the air high enough that, you know, it was difficult to see with your naked eye, but with binoculars I could clearly make out every detail of it. What really surprised me was the fact that I could hear nothing. I mean, literally nothing. And the other fact was that it was absolutely silent. It was just hovering there like a drone, but it was in the shape of a jet, had wings, a tail, everything. And I noticed in my binoculars that it had small lights on the aircraft. Not like lights that a normal aircraft have that alert other aircrafts in the area that shine out and down. These were more military-oriented lights. I remember when I was in the Army and we were driving our military equipment across country during the night, we had lights, but they had a little shield in front of the lights that would shine the light directly down and only right in front of us. And so anybody that was out, the enemy or anybody out looking, would not see these lights. They would be shielded except for right in the ground in front of us, so we could make sure we were on the path, the trail, or the road that we were traveling on. And that's what this aircraft lights reminded me of. These lights, you could see them looking up with the binoculars. You could see the light shining out a little ways around, but you could not see where the light was coming from. So they were shielded. Obviously a military, you know, stealth type aircraft. Anyway, at that time it was, you know, very amazing to me. I notified my friend who was with me, and we were both watching these things, watching that. Well, we only saw one, but watching this particular aircraft through our binoculars and then talking to ourselves about it. The way the aircraft hovered, I don't know if it was aware of us or whether it was what it was doing. But anyway, a little bit later, as it started to get lighter, we kind of lost interest in that because we were focusing on or hoping to see a trophy mule deer buck come walking out. But my friend, a little while later, he said, "Hey, what's that?" And he pointed, and I looked up, and there was, it looked like in the early morning sky with the ambient light from the sun beyond the horizon and the starlight, you could see what looked like blackbirds or a huge, if you've noticed or seen a huge formation of blackbirds as they fly through the air. And they all seem to move in unison and they make a shape or a formation. But the interesting thing about this particular formation, it was dark, you know, it was black and it was kind of shadowy and cloudy, was that it was moving very, very slowly, as if it was just gliding with the wind, you know. And birds, you know, they move rather rapidly and change shape, but this thing was morphing and changing shape, but it was doing it very, very slowly. And it was very interesting. I looked through the binoculars. I still couldn't make out what it was through my binoculars. I had a very powerful Swarovski spotting scope on a tripod that was set up, and so I trained it on that location, raised it up and trained it on that location, and it seemed to be small. It was a small particles, and they seemed to be like graphite or metallic or something. They kind of shimmered and sheened a little bit, and I noticed that they were falling. And the wind was blowing them, and as the wind was blowing them and they were falling, that's what was creating that morphing, moving, changing formation in the sky. I'd never seen anything like that before. It happened approximately 10 minutes or so after we lost sight of or lost interest in that aircraft that we'd seen flying around and hovering up in the sky. Totally silent. I don't know why we didn't associate the two together, at least at first. But as we were looking for deer and glassing and being alert, we would look back at this shape in the air that was slowly drifting away and falling at the same time. And looking back on it, it was actually falling directly down and into this drainage, this creek, this water drainage. And this creek or drainage eventually ends up in the Colorado River water system. Downstream, many miles, it would end up into the Colorado River water system. So I kept looking back while we were watching for deer, and there was nothing else to do, and we were in kind of a good area where we could see, and then all of a sudden we noticed another of these black formations coming in. I was like, that's really odd, and I got my binoculars and I looked around, and then I noticed that same aircraft, drone, jet, whatever it was, slowly moving, and as it was moving, it was ejecting these clouds. These dark clouds were coming out of this aircraft. And the feeling I had at that moment was one of oppression or distress. I felt like whatever is going on there is very nefarious. The time of day, early morning, when you could barely see over a drainage of water with a totally silent drone or aircraft, and emitting this dark cloud of chemicals or metallic fine particles into this drainage. What the hell were they doing? What's going on here? It was very subvert. They obviously were trying not to be seen in what they were doing. Totally silent, blackout lights, and they're releasing chemicals or something into this drainage. Anyway, I brought this to the attention of my friend. We sat there watching through our binoculars and the spotting scope, and I wish that I would have got my camera out and hooked it up to my spotting scope, my phone scope, and put it onto the spotting scope and videoed it. But we were so focused on what we were seeing and looking for deer that for some reason we didn't do that. But since that time, and we've talked about this extensively, back and forth over the years when we talk to each other, we recount that incident and wonder what the hell was going on. But in my view, I to this day still wonder what that was. And after doing research and trying to figure out what type of aircraft or drone or whatever that is, the closest thing that I can figure out was that it was a Reaper drone, a military Reaper drone. Totally quiet. It could hover, it could move slow, it could move fast, and it was releasing some nefarious substance into our environment. Now, some people may explain it away as, they were spraying pesticides or herbicides to destroy invasive plants or animals or something like that. But you wouldn't do that in complete darkness, before daylight, near a small town, near a rural area that whatever you're doing would impact the water system in this drainage. And all this water from this drainage in this surrounding area is going to end up in the Colorado River aquifer. Lake Powell, Lake Mead, Lake Havasu. It's going to affect all the downstream communities, whatever this chemical or whatever this substance was. And if anybody's a scientist, a biologist, a person that does chemical analysis, you need to get in touch with me and I'll put you in that drainage in the exact location where those particles and those things were falling, so that you could take soil samples, so that you could take water samples and see if there is anything that shows up as an anomaly. And you know, as we go on and on, we see that things that our government, the deep state, behind the scenes are doing to the people. Are these carcinogens? Are they trying to depopulate? Certainly it wouldn't be anything that they wanted to do above board and in the light of day, or they wouldn't have done it the way it was being done. So is this our government? Is this a nefarious part of our government? Are they doing this all over America? Are they trying to destroy our agricultural areas? What exactly is going on? If you have any comments or questions, post it in the comments below, and let's see if we can come to any resolutions about what might have been going on in this instance. Anyway, if you want to support the channel, you can look at the PayPal link below. I have a link to our print-on-demand site that has our merchandise and interesting things, and in the future I'm going to have a website associated with this page. I hope you have a great year. Look forward to more videos in the near future.